Zahara Wells knew how to read a room. Not because someone taught her, but because she had to learn early. Born in Newark and raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs, Zahara mastered the art of survival before she understood what safety meant. While other girls played house, Zahara studied how to keep one standing. She watched her mom work 14-hour days, return home in silence, then get up the next morning without complaint. It wasn't glamorous. It was grit, and Zahara carried that same fire. By 27, she was running strategic brand campaigns at one of the top mid-sized marketing firms in Soho. She wasn't loud in meetings, but when she spoke, the room quieted. She didn't beg to be seen. Her work demanded attention. Executives noticed, clients noticed, and soon, so did he. His name was Darian Knox, CEO of Knox Innovations, a rising star in the tech world with a jawline that looked like it was cut from stone, and the kind of quiet confidence that made every room tilt in his direction. Darian didn't talk much at panels, but when he did, people listened. He didn't network the way others did. He studied. And that's exactly what he did when he saw Zahara across the room at a conference in Midtown. He didn't approach right away. He watched her shake hands, take notes, smile. Not a fake one, but the kind that made people lower their guard. 3 days later, she received a lunch invitation. Not from his assistant, from him. He didn't mention business, just asked if she liked oysters. She didn't, but she said yes anyway. Lunch turned into dinner. Dinner turned into weekends. And within 5 months, Darian proposed. It wasn't over the top, no fireworks, no crowd. Just a quiet evening in his downtown apartment, Zahara's favorite vinyl spinning. In the background, and a single velvet box on the table beside her wine glass. He didn't ask her with flowery words. He looked her dead in the eyes and said, "I don't want to spend another year building something that doesn't have you in it." Zahara said yes, not because of the ring, or the name, or the future he painted, but because when she spoke, Darian listened. He remembered her father's name, even though she'd only said it once. He remembered the exact date her mother had her first stroke. He didn't promise to protect her. He just showed up, consistently. And for a woman like Zahara, who had spent her whole life being her own shield, that meant everything. The wedding was private. 30 people. Garden estate. No press. But their union didn't stay private for long. By the time they returned from their honeymoon in St. Bart's, Zahara Knox was trending. Blogs called them the future of power couples, the new black and white American dream. She hated the label, but she smiled for the cameras. Because if being next to Darian meant being respected, maybe it was worth it. He built them a home in the Hamptons. 3 floors, smart everything, and a view that stretched so far it looked like the sky melted into the sea. Zahara designed the interior herself, clean lines, soft neutrals, accents of deep gold. She finally felt like she had arrived. The first year of their marriage was nearly flawless. Every Thursday was their dinner night. Every Sunday was their off-the-grid day. No phones, no press, just 2 people in robes, barefoot on marble, sipping coffee and building playlists. They made love like they meant it, held each other like they remembered being alone. And when Darian touched her cheek, he did it like he had nowhere else to be. Zahara began to relax. For once, she didn't have to be the strong one. But love, when rushed, hides its cracks well. In year 2, small things changed. He started checking his phone more during dinner. Stopped calling her from the airport. Missed 1 Sunday. Then 2, Zahara asked once. "Everything okay?" He nodded. Said work was picking up. She believed him. Asked again a few weeks later. He kissed her forehead. "You know how this quarter is. Don't worry, baby." She smiled. But deep down, her gut started whispering. The problem was, Zahara didn't know how to stop trusting people she loved. She'd never been taught how. She still showed up. Still packed his luggage when he traveled. Still put on his favorite lipstick before he returned from a trip. Still answered every media question about their marriage with elegance. But little by little, Darian started disappearing. First emotionally. then physically, and Zahara, once loud in her spirit, became silent in her own home. She hated herself for it. At work, no one noticed. She led her team with poise, closed a 7-figure rebrand deal for a luxury food brand, trained 2 new hires. But at night, she curled under 600 thread count sheets alone, next to a phone that barely lit up. He stopped waking her with kisses. She stopped expecting them. And when she asked, "Are we okay?" he said, "Of course. You're just tired. I'm tired." "That's all," Zahara nodded. Because marriage is work. Because couples go through things. Because asking more than once made her feel needy. A word Darian never used, but made her feel in his silences. She journaled in secret. Is it betrayal if you don't catch them? Is it neglect if they never admit it? Is it loneliness if they say they still love you? She tore that page out, burned it in the kitchen sink. The tipping point came quietly. One morning, he left without kissing her goodbye. That night, he didn't call. She waited, then waited more. By midnight, she went to bed. The next morning, she received a single message. Touchdown. Back Wednesday. No heart, no warmth, no details. And Zahara sat on the edge of their bed, staring at that message, wondering how 2 years could become this hollow. But she didn't text back. She stood, dressed, and booked a train to DC to visit her mother. The first photo of them as a married couple made headlines within hours. Darian wore a custom black suit, no tie. Zahara stood beside him in a pearl-white satin dress with sleeves that touched her knuckles. No cleavage, no sparkle. Just elegance, class, grace, everything the media didn't expect and couldn't stop writing about. The future of modern marriage, when brains and billionaires collide. Zahara Knox, the PR queen who tamed tech royalty. Zahara ignored the headlines, not because she didn't care, but because she didn't need the attention. She'd spent too many years trying to be heard in boardrooms full of men who assumed they knew more. Now she had a seat at every table she walked into, and if being married to Darian opened more doors, fine. But Zahara never forgot. She was already whole when he found her. The first 6 months of their marriage were intoxicating. They weren't always home, but when they were present, deeply, intimately. Darian cooked on Sundays, badly, but still. They danced in the living room to Coltrane and Etta James, watched documentaries, debated startup valuations and the ethics of venture capital, made love in the hallway just because they didn't want to wait to reach the bedroom. She trusted the way he watched her. It wasn't lust. It was study, like he was still learning her, piece by piece. Zahara let herself believe this would last. Their first argument came unexpectedly. A client of Zahara's, an outspoken black fashion executive, posted a public critique of Knox Innovation's hiring practices. Zahara reposted it with a caption that said, "Important convo. Tech has work to do." Within hours, Darian called her. "You're my wife. You can't repost things that damage my company." Zahara blinked. "It's the truth. I'm not saying it's not, but there's timing. Optics." She paused. "So my voice is okay, as long as it doesn't shake your image." He didn't answer right away. That silence stayed with her long after the call ended. A few weeks later, she noticed he stopped mentioning her at press events. He used to say, "My wife Zahara is the real genius in the house," whenever asked about work-life balance. Now, he just nodded politely and pivoted. She told herself it was stress, IPO season, heavy investor meetings, but doubt crept in, slow, heavy, and hard to shake. Her assistant began noticing too. "Boss, you okay?" Zahara would nod, smile, say she was just tired. And in truth, she was. Tired of guessing. Tired of smiling at red carpet events where Darian's arm held hers loosely, like a placeholder. Tired of hearing Celeste's name too often in his calendar. Late night with Celeste, Asia Deck reviews, Celeste follow-up, travel brief dinner with Celeste, board sponsor. She wasn't stupid. She didn't accuse. She observed. And every time she raised it lightly, Darian said the same thing. She's the best I've got. I need her on this. Zahara wanted to believe that was all it was. One night, around midnight, she was curled on the couch watching a documentary. The front door clicked open. Darian stepped in. She didn't move. Neither did he. You didn't call, she said quietly. I figured I'd just show up. Where were you? He dropped his keys, removed his jacket. Board dinner. It ran long. She looked at him, not because of where he was, but because he didn't care that she noticed. She turned the volume back up. He walked to their bedroom without another word. The next morning she stared at him while he slept, and for the first time she asked herself, what if this isn't temporary? What if this isn't a rough patch? What if this is just who he is now? When she got into the office that day, she closed the door and opened a new journal. She didn't title the page. She just wrote, "If love no longer feels like home, is it still love?" She capped the pen and didn't open that journal again until weeks later. By the time their second anniversary arrived, there was no celebration. Darian was in Aspen for a startup retreat. He sent her white roses, a handwritten card that read, "Grateful for everything we've built. You're my strength." Zahara stared at the note. There was no date on it, no call before, no video, just flowers, generic, expensive, safe. She placed the vase on the kitchen counter, then left for DC the next morning to visit her mother. Her mom noticed something immediately. "You're not smiling with your eyes anymore." Zahara looked up from the stove. "I'm fine, Mom, just tired." Her mother didn't press, but that night she rubbed Zahara's shoulders and said quietly, "Sometimes. The things that look the most beautiful are the ones that trap us first." Zahara nodded. She didn't respond. She stayed in DC for 5 days. On the 5th morning, she stared at her phone. No new texts from Darian. No, "How's your trip?" No, "When are you back?" And suddenly, something clicked. She missed him. But not because of the man in her memory. She missed who he used to be. And in that moment, she stopped waiting. That evening, she booked a return ticket. Didn't text, didn't email, didn't drop a hint. She would fly in, surprise him, and maybe, just maybe, reignite something. She didn't expect perfection, just effort. Her flight landed at JFK at 6:45 p.m. By 8:30, she stood at the entrance of their Hamptons home, suitcase in hand, heart open, hope still clinging to her like perfume. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and heard music, soft jazz, familiar. She smiled. Maybe he was planning something. Then, laughter, a woman's, not hers. Zahara froze. Her hand tightened around the suitcase handle. She moved slowly, quietly, toward the source. Every step felt like a betrayal before the truth. She turned the corner and saw it. Celeste, barefoot, holding her wine glass, wearing Darian's hoodie, smiling. Zahara didn't move at first. Her mind froze. Not from fear, from disbelief. Celeste was curled on her sofa, wrapped in his hoodie, sipping wine from her glass. Not a care in the world. Darian sat across from her, not flustered, not panicked, just watching her. "I thought you weren't back until Thursday," he said, his voice flat, almost bored. Zahara didn't respond. She didn't blink, because if she blinked, she might cry, and Zahara Wells refused to let either of them see that. Celeste stood up slowly, adjusting the hem of the hoodie, clearly not wearing anything underneath. "I should go." Zahara's eyes finally moved, but not to Darian, to her. "No," she said softly. "You should both stay." Her voice was calm, even deadly. "Because I have questions, and tonight I'm done pretending I'm blind." Darian shifted on the couch, not from guilt, but from discomfort. He wasn't used to Zahara speaking like this. She always gave him space, grace, benefit of the doubt. But this version of Zahara, the one standing in heels at the edge of their living room, like she was delivering a keynote. He didn't know this woman. Celeste sat back down, awkwardly. Zahara set her suitcase beside the wall, then walked in like it was any other night. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply poured herself a fresh glass of water. Darian opened his mouth. "Z, don't," she cut in. "You had days to talk to me. Weeks. You chose this instead." "I didn't plan this," he said quickly. "It just happened." She turned to him. "She just fell into my clothes, into my house, into my wine." Silence. Zahara looked at Celeste. "Is this why you kept scheduling late-night board calls?" Celeste didn't flinch. "We've been working closely for months." Zahara nodded. "I know. I've seen your name more than mine in his calendar." Darian stood. "Zahara!" She raised her hand. "No, sit." He sat, not because he wanted to, because he had never seen her like this. Controlled, cold, clear. "I'm not here to win you back," Zahara said. "I'm not here to fight for anything. I'm here to listen to your excuses and then leave." Celeste crossed her legs. "He told me your marriage was struggling." Zahara smiled. "A real one." "Of course he did. Cheating men always rewrite the story so they're not the villain." Darian rubbed his face. "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that." Zahara's tone never changed. "You let her in. Into our company, our home, our bedroom." She stared at him hard. "I don't need an apology. I need clarity." Darian sat down slowly, then finally said the words Zahara had always feared. "I didn't mean to hurt you." That was it. Not "I was wrong." Not "I failed you." Just that lazy sentence. Zahara laughed. Quietly. "You didn't mean to hurt me, but you invited someone else into my life without permission." She looked at Celeste. "She drank from my glass, walked barefoot on my floors, and sat where I cried waiting for you to come home." Zahara stepped back, took one long look around the room. "I get it now. You didn't change. You just stopped pretending." She walked toward the bedroom. Neither of them moved to follow. 10 minutes later, she rolled her suitcase out. Same one she walked in with. But now, heavier. Not with clothes, with truth. She walked past them both. No second glance. At the door, she paused. "You had everything, Darian. My body, my trust, my loyalty." Her voice dropped low. "But now? You have nothing." She walked out into the night. And this time, she didn't look back. Back in the car, she didn't cry. She didn't even text anyone. She turned off her phone, leaned her head back, and let silence hold her. Not the cold kind, the kind that frees you. That night, she checked into a hotel in Manhattan. The concierge recognized her. "Mrs. Knox?" "No," Zahara said gently. "Just Zahara." She sat by the window in her suite and stared out at the skyline. People below rushed home to someone. She had no home now. But she had something better. Herself. The next morning she made 2 calls. One to her lawyer. The other to her accountant. Not for a divorce. Not yet. But to secure her finances. Zahara knew better than to react emotionally. She'd been blindsided once. She wouldn't be again. At noon, she logged into her laptop, opened a blank document, typed one word at the top, well-spoken. A media concept she'd shelved when she married Darian. A platform to spotlight women of color in branding, tech, and media. She was done shelving herself. She didn't tell anyone about the betrayal. Not yet. She didn't need pity. She needed movement. Within a week, she had 5 advisors, 2 legal checks, and a pitch deck. Within 3 months, she had $2 million in funding. And a waiting list of interns who wanted to learn from Zahara Wells, not Mrs. Knox. The first time she gave a public interview post-split, she wore a black silk suit and no ring. She didn't name Darian, didn't speak of Celeste, but she said this: "Sometimes we shrink to keep the peace. We get small to avoid asking too many questions, but silence doesn't save anything. It only makes you forget your own voice." The clip went viral, not because of the drama, but because every woman who had ever stayed quiet felt her. Meanwhile, Darian watched in silence, watched as Zahara's name rose on Twitter trends, watched her face on magazine covers, watched men whisper about her brilliance, watched women call her their role model. And for the first time since she left, Darian couldn't talk his way out of what he'd done, because Zahara didn't expose him. She outgrew him. The media never got the full story, and Zahara never gave it to them. She didn't do a tell-all, didn't post a thread, didn't leak anything to tabloids. Instead, she stayed visible. On her terms. She showed up at conferences, hosted panels on brand strategy and racial equity, talked about rebuilding identity after silence, not after betrayal. People listened, not because of gossip, because of grace. Her name started trending again. This time, for something other than being Darian Knox's wife. Zahara Wells launches Well-Spoken $2 million raised in 12 weeks. The future of media representation has a new face. Zahara speaks, and it's everything we needed to hear behind closed doors. Darian watched it unfold. And the irony wasn't lost on him. He'd fallen for Zahara because of her clarity, her brilliance, her strength. And yet, he tried to reduce her to his side piece, his image, wife. Now the world saw what he ignored, and that truth gnawed at him. Celeste didn't last long after Zahara left. She stuck around for 6 weeks, maybe less. Darian thought having her close would fill the silence. It didn't. She wasn't Zahara, never had been. She didn't challenge him, didn't ask the hard questions, didn't care about the impact of their work, only the optics. She made his nights easier, but his mornings lonelier. Eventually, she took a consulting offer in Paris, left a brief note. "You're a great man, Darian, but you were never ready for someone like her." That one stung more than he expected. Meanwhile, Zahara moved into a penthouse in Tribeca, not for the view, for the peace. She designed every corner, from the custom shelving to the glass dining table where she now hosted team strategy sessions. Her mornings were slow, intentional. Her evenings were quiet, whole. She cooked again, danced barefoot, slept diagonally, and every time her phone buzzed with Darian's name, she let it ring. Because healing didn't come through closure, it came through distance. One day, she got a call from Cruz, her older brother, former Marine, protective as hell, never liked Darian. "Z," he said, "I saw him on TV. Looked like hell." She paused. "Don't give him that space in your head," Cruz added. "I'm not," Zahara replied calmly. She wasn't angry anymore, just clear. That clarity became her power. Women from across the country started messaging her, not for gossip, for advice, for encouragement, for the blueprint. How did you leave and still stay soft? How do you start again when your whole identity was tied to someone else? Was there a day you just knew it was time? Zahara responded to every message she could, because she remembered what it felt like to doubt yourself quietly while the world praised your image. She never wanted another woman to feel that alone again. Darian kept trying to reach her, sometimes with words, sometimes with gifts. One day, a piano arrived at her office. No card, but she knew the story behind it. Once, during a late night in Aspen, they'd walked past a small bar where a man was playing live jazz. Zahara had stopped, mesmerized, told Darian how much she missed playing, that she gave it up after college. He'd remembered. She didn't send it back, but she didn't call either. He kept watching from the sidelines. Boardrooms felt colder. Investors were less patient. His name, once linked to success, now triggered caution. He wasn't cancelled. He was questioned. And that, for a man like Darian, was worse. Meanwhile, Zahara prepared for the next stage. She wasn't just rebuilding, she was expanding. The Wells Institute was in development, a hub for women in media and tech leadership. She wasn't doing it for claps. She was doing it because legacy mattered more than love now. Then came the invite. A foundation in Manhattan asked her to keynote at a fundraiser for young women in STEM. It was the first time she'd be speaking at an event Darian had previously headlined. She said yes without hesitation, not to prove anything, but to show up for herself. The night of the event, she wore a deep emerald jumpsuit, hair pulled back. No ring, no fear. She didn't check the RSVP list, didn't need to. But when she stepped onto the stage and saw him standing at the back of the room, she didn't flinch. She simply inhaled and began. Sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves. That was her opening line. The audience leaned in. She talked about silence, about showing up to rooms that want your shine but not your story, about how loyalty can become a leash if you're not careful. She didn't mention him, not once, but every word hit like truth anyway. When she stepped off the stage, the crowd rose to their feet. Zahara didn't smile for applause. She smiled for clarity. And Darian? He didn't leave. He waited until the last guest walked out. Stood by the wall. Still, silent, until Zahara finally looked at him. "I didn't come to talk," he said, his voice lower than she remembered. "I came to listen." Zahara didn't smile. But she didn't walk away either. "Good," she said, "because I don't have much to say." They stood in the hallway for a moment. Neither rushed. Neither filled the silence with pleasantries. Finally she said, "You lost more than a marriage, Darian." He nodded. "I know." She took a breath. "You lost me." Another pause. "But if you're here for redemption, it's not for me to give, it's for you to earn." Darian nodded again. "I'm not asking for anything back. I just want to be honest now." That night, they sat on opposite ends of a bench outside the venue. Talked for 2 hours. Not about the affair. Not about Celeste. About books, business, regret. About who they were before things got blurry, and who they might have been if they'd moved slower. Zahara didn't promise him anything. She didn't give him hope. But she gave him time, and for the first time in a long while, he was okay with that. You build a life with someone, and one day, without warning, they become a stranger in your home. Have you ever stayed in a relationship longer than you should, just to protect the image of perfect? Have you ignored your instincts because you didn't want to believe the worst? Zahara gave her loyalty, her silence, her strength, and when she needed love the most, all she got was lies. What would you have done if you walked in on the betrayal Zahara saw? Would you have stayed and demanded the truth, or walked out and rebuilt from nothing? Drop your answer in the comments. Like this video if you believe self-respect comes before any relationship. Subscribe for more real, emotional, and powerful stories like this. And share this story with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. Darian didn't hear the door open. Not at first. He was laughing. Genuinely laughing. Something he hadn't done in weeks. Celeste had just told him a ridiculous story about a failed campaign pitch in Milan. She was barefoot, curled up on the couch like she belonged there. The jazz playlist hummed through the surround speakers. The air smelled like Zahara's lavender candles, because he hadn't changed anything since she left. He didn't want to, but somehow he had let someone else fill the space Zahara used to own. Celeste took another sip of wine and stretched her legs across the couch. "You know," she said casually, "for someone so private, your house is warm, lived in. She has good taste." Darian didn't respond. He was thinking about Zahara, not in a regretful way, just remembering. The way she used to curl on the couch with a blanket and book, the sound of her heels clicking down the hallway, how she never interrupted his work calls, but always knew when to bring coffee. The silence in the room was comforting and crushing all at once. And then, footsteps. He turned his head toward the foyer, and his stomach dropped. Zahara stood frozen in the hallway, still in her travel coat, hair slicked back, eyes sharp. He didn't jump up, didn't panic, because part of him knew this day would come. "I thought you weren't back until Thursday," Darian said calmly, rising slowly from the chair. She didn't respond, didn't blink, The suitcase beside her said more than words ever could. Celeste stood, startled. "I should go." "No," Zahara replied. "You should both stay. Because I have questions." Her voice cut like glass. Calm, controlled, terrifying. Darian had faced investors, regulators, global critics. He'd never felt fear like this. Celeste looked between them, unsure if she was still a guest, or the mistake finally being named. Zahara didn't give her time to decide. "You've been in my home," she said, stepping inside, "drinking from my glasses, wearing his hoodie. Smiling like this isn't wrong." Celeste's face stiffened. "I didn't mean disrespect. I thought—" "You thought what?" Zahara snapped. "That I wouldn't notice. That I'd let it slide like a good little wife." Darian stepped forward. "Zahara, let's talk." "No," she said firmly, her gaze never leaving Celeste. "You've done enough talking behind my back." She looked around the room. Everything was the same, but she wasn't. Darian wanted to explain. He really did. But for once, he didn't know what to say. It had started with texts, late-night pitch reviews, dinners that turned into hours of venting about the stress of being perfect for the world. Celeste listened, but she also leaned in, touched his hand too long, stayed later than needed. And he let her, because it was easier. Celeste didn't challenge him. She didn't ask for emotional presence. She didn't question his silence. She filled the gap, but she never filled the void. "I didn't plan this," Darian said quietly. Zahara gave him a look that could slice steel. "No one plans betrayal, Darian. They just choose it." That line hung in the air like smoke. Celeste stood straighter. "He told me things were broken." Zahara nodded slowly. "Of course he did. You don't cross lines unless you think someone else already erased them." She turned to Darian. "Were we broken, or were you just bored?" The question knocked the breath out of him, not because it was unfair, because it was accurate. He had stopped trying, stopped showing up, stopped choosing her. And now, she was standing in their home, burning it down with nothing but truth. She walked past them, suitcase rolling behind her. When she returned with her things, Darian stood blocking the hallway. "Z, move. I know I hurt you. I know You undid me," she said. "You took the best parts of me, my trust, my loyalty, my belief in us, and you traded it for convenience." He didn't move, but he didn't argue either. What could he say? She was right. "You had everything, Darian," she said, her voice softer now. "Everything. But now you have nothing." And she walked out. Celeste stayed behind for a moment. "You should have told me she was like that." "Like what?" "Unbreakable." Darian didn't respond. She was right. He had broken the bond. But Zahara had only sharpened. That night, Darian sat in the living room alone. The jazz still played. The wine was still half full, but the warmth was gone. And for the first time in years, Darian Knox realized he wasn't the man he used to be. And maybe he never was. Zahara didn't cry in the car. Not when the driver asked if she needed directions. Not when the streetlights blurred past her window. Not when her name popped up on 2 missed calls, both from Darian. She just stared ahead, jaw set. Because when you've been quietly breaking for months, the actual shatter feels like release. At the front desk of the Manhattan Grand, the concierge greeted her with a polite smile. "Mrs. Knox, welcome back." She cut him off with one word. "Wells." A pause. Then a gentle nod. "Of course, Miss Wells." "Your suite is ready." The room was quiet, cool, pristine. Just how she needed it. She walked in, closed the door behind her, and let her body sag against it. The suitcase tipped slightly, but she caught it. Control. Even now. Always. She didn't shower. Didn't change. She walked straight to the floor-length window and stared out over the city. New York blinked and shimmered like nothing had changed. But she had. Her phone buzzed again. Darian. Then again. Celeste. She turned it off. sat on the bed, and, finally, cried. But not like before. This wasn't grief. This was shedding. When morning came, she didn't order breakfast. She brewed the coffee herself, took the first sip, and whispered, "It's time." By 9 a.m., her laptop was open. A new document, untitled. She stared at the blinking cursor, then typed, "Well-spoken, a digital media platform. A voice for women in tech, PR, and power. But especially for those who've ever had to shrink to survive." She exhaled. She wasn't a wife today. She wasn't a victim. She was a builder. She called her mentor, Layla Griffin, former CEO of a PR empire in DC. "Took you long enough," Layla said. "I've been waiting for this call for 2 years." Zahara smiled. "I want to build something that outlives the pain. Then you need a vision deck, 3 advisors, and someone who knows the funding game. I need a team that doesn't flinch at the word audacity. Send me your notes. I'll clean them up and make calls. Give me 3 days." Zahara stared at her reflection in the mirror while Layla talked. She didn't look like someone who'd just left her husband. She looked like someone who had found herself again. 3 days became 3 weeks. She secured a brand strategist, a tech partner, and a legal advisor. One of them asked, "Why now?" Zahara said, "Because the silence in my marriage taught me the danger of being voiceless. I don't want another woman to lose herself quietly." Meanwhile, Darian sat in the Hamptons' house, the one he built for them. Now echoing, he tried working, couldn't focus. Tried sleeping, didn't last more than 4 hours. He deleted Celeste's number, not because he hated her, but because he hated what she represented, an easy distraction from his emotional laziness. Zahara had required presence, listening, truth, and Darian hadn't delivered. His assistant asked if he wanted to go to the Aspen retreat again. He declined. "I need to stay in the city." "Anything urgent?" "Everything." Back in Tribeca, Zahara found a penthouse, a 2-bedroom with skyline views and an exposed brick study. She didn't tell anyone except Layla. She moved in quietly, bought new furniture, light oak, warm greys, deep, grounding green accents. She placed one framed photo on the shelf, her mother, in a white dress, barefoot on the beach. That was the only image that mattered now. She held her first team meeting from the new space. 4 women, 3 Zoom boxes, 1 dream. "We're not a media company," Zahara said. "We're a reminder. That truth doesn't require permission." They all nodded. One of the interns, barely 23, typed in the chat, "I've never felt seen until now." Zahara felt the sting behind her eyes again, but she blinked it away. There was still work to do. Meanwhile, headlines started shifting. Not about Darian, about her. Zahara Wells, building an empire post everything, the woman who left quietly and returned louder than ever from power couple to powerhouse. Zahara's next chapter, she never clapped back, never corrected. She just kept showing up. At panels, at women's conferences, at brunch tables full of dreamers and doers. She told her story in pieces, not for pity, but for permission. Darian saw it all. Her TEDx talk, the Forbes feature, the panel clip where she said, "Loyalty to someone who's not honest with themselves is self-betrayal." That one hurt. Because she wasn't wrong. He stopped showing up to events, stopped giving statements. He let her shine without interference. And the silence felt different now. Not like distance, like consequence. One night, Zahara played jazz in her new kitchen. It was Coltrane, same song that played the night she walked in on Darian and Celeste. But this time, she hummed along. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means the memory no longer owns you. Zahara had never liked being the center of attention. Not because she lacked confidence, but because she knew what came with being seen. The assumptions, the judgment, the expectations. But now, she didn't hide. She stepped forward. It began with a podcast. A friend from her Soho agency days invited her to talk about media representation. Zahara agreed, under one condition. No gossip, no digs, just value. The episode aired under the title, Voice-over Image, Building Power After Silence. Within 48 hours, it had over 200,000 downloads. Not because she shared tea, because she shared truth. Do you remember the moment you knew it was time to go? The host asked gently. Zahara smiled. I walked into my own home and didn't recognize the man I married or the woman I had become. A long pause. And I realized I couldn't afford to lose her. The quote went viral. TikToks, threads, quotes on minimalist backgrounds with her name in the corner. Women stitched her voice into reels about self-worth. And Darian saw it all. Every clip, every post, every comment that said, she saved herself. She didn't clap back. She created, this is what starting over with grace looks like. It shook something in him. Because he had lived with Zahara, slept beside her, built with her, and he had never seen her this alive. At Knox Innovations, things remained polished on the outside. Investors were still invested, products still shipped, partnerships still bloomed. But inside, Darian moved differently, quieter, more guarded. He cancelled interviews, skipped panels, dodged questions. He no longer looked forward to the spotlight, because now she was in it. Meanwhile, Zahara took the stage, literally. At the Women of Tech Leadership Summit in Manhattan, she stood before 800. People in a sapphire blue pantsuit and heels that clicked like punctuation marks. She began without a script. When I launched Well-Spoken, I didn't do it to be inspirational, she said, steady. I did it to survive. A beat. Because when you're used to being praised for holding it all together, you start believing that silence is strength. She scanned the crowd. But silence didn't save me. Truth did. Backstage, one of the event coordinators cried. I've been sitting at the edge of leaving my marriage for months, she whispered. You just told me it's okay to choose peace. Zahara didn't say anything profound. She just hugged her. Sometimes the most powerful response is presence. That same night, a photo surfaced online. Zahara on stage, Darian in the crowd. A fan had zoomed in, recognizing them both. It spread fast. Speculations flared. But Zahara didn't address it. She had nothing to prove, and no headlines to chase. Later that week, she got a letter at the Wells Institute. No name, just a clean white envelope with her initials. Inside, a short note. You never stopped being the best thing that happened to me. I see it now. I just hope I'm not too late to become someone worth seeing back. DK. She folded it neatly, placed it in her desk drawer. Didn't reply. Her assistant asked one morning, do you miss him? Zahara thought for a moment. I miss the version of me who thought we were safe. But no, I don't miss him. I miss who I was when I believed he'd choose us. That afternoon, she led a roundtable with 5 young founders. They were eager, bold, ready to be coached. Here's what I learned the hard way, Zahara said. Your business can't heal what your boundaries won't protect. They wrote that down. One of them asked, how do you know when someone deserves a second chance? Zahara looked at her and said, back in his loft, Darian rewatched her TEDx talk for the 3rd time. He paused on a line. You don't have to burn bridges, but you do have to walk away from ones that collapse under your truth. He exhaled, not because he disagreed, but because he knew she had already crossed the bridge, and she wasn't looking back. He began therapy. Twice a week. Not to win her back, but because he couldn't lie to himself anymore. The silence he'd filled their home with wasn't peace. It was avoidance. He had mastered product launches, IPOs, and PR spins. But he had never mastered presence. And now, the one woman who had always asked for presence was gone. Zahara didn't celebrate his regret. She didn't need his transformation to validate her walk. She just continued forward, brick by brick, word by word, room by room, until every space she entered felt like hers again. The Wells Institute wasn't built to impress donors. It wasn't created for claps, clicks, or panels with gift bags. It was born in a hotel room, 2 hours after Zahara stared at her reflection and asked herself, who do I want to be now? Not someone's wife. Not someone's PR weapon. Not someone silenced in satin and diamonds. She wanted to build something honest, concrete, free. 6 months later, it had grown into a team of 30 women. Diverse, brilliant, battle-tested. Every Thursday morning, they met in Zahara's Tribeca office, shoes off, laptops open, coffee strong. They didn't speak in buzzwords. They spoke in truth. Every campaign they launched told a real story. Every voice they amplified had been ignored for too long. They didn't just elevate women. They armed them with the tools to run empires. One day, Zahara asked her team, "What if our next project wasn't a brand, but a generation?" The room went silent. Then her operations lead, Nyla, said, "You mean leadership incubators?" Zahara nodded. "For young women who don't know yet that they're supposed to be powerful." That day, the Wells Collective was born, a sub-program for high school and early college women across the 5 boroughs, fully funded, fully led by women who once had to fight to be heard. Media caught on fast. But this time, Zahara didn't run from the attention. She directed it. She curated every interview, declined anything performative. She wasn't trying to rebuild a brand. She was proving a point. You don't need to burn a man down to rise without him. Meanwhile, Darian Knox prepared for the one thing he never imagined doing, speaking without control. He had been invited to the Ethics in Innovation Summit, a tech conference that once treated him like royalty. This year, they invited him to speak. On rebuilding culture after personal failure, he said yes, not because of PR, because for the first time in years, he didn't want to dodge the mirror. On stage, he wore a black turtleneck, no suit, no ring. "I've been praised for a long time," he began. "And sometimes praise makes you lazy." People leaned in. Darian didn't deflect, didn't over-explain. He just owned it. "There was a woman who once stood beside me. She built quietly, loved deeply, and I didn't protect that space. I overvalued comfort and undervalued truth." A pause. "I didn't lose her in one moment. I lost her in the 1,000 moments I thought she'd stay anyway." The crowd didn't applaud immediately, but when they did, it wasn't for his brand. It was for the man trying. Zahara saw the clip days later. Her team had sent it to the group chat with a single wide-eyed emoji. She watched it twice, not for validation. For confirmation, Darian had finally heard her. Too late to keep her. But maybe not too late to become a better version of himself. That Friday, Zahara hosted the collective's first student event, an intimate brunch and workshop with 20 teen girls and 5 early career women of color in media. They laughed, cried, spoke freely. One girl, barely 17, stood and said, "I never saw a woman walk away from a man and still win until I saw you. I thought love was supposed to hurt. You showed me it doesn't have to." Zahara blinked away the burn in her eyes. Not because she was emotional, because the work was working. Later that night, she stood alone on her balcony. City lights flickered below. The sky was wide open, and for the first time since she left that mansion in the Hamptons, she didn't feel like she had escaped. She felt like she had arrived. In another borough, Darian sat on his couch, no glass in hand, no playlist humming, just silence. But this time, it didn't ache. It made space. He opened his journal, wrote only one sentence. "If you love her, you must honor her growth, especially if you're no longer part of it." And then he closed it, not with sadness, but peace. It wasn't planned, not fully, not like before when dates were picked weeks in advance, tables reserved under false names to avoid attention. This time, it started with a short message. "I'm not asking to fix anything, just coffee, my treat, your terms." Zahara stared at the text for a long moment. Then she closed it, didn't delete it, didn't respond. She waited a week, then responded with 3 words, Saturday, 3 p.m. Vine. Vine was a quiet cafe tucked behind a flower shop in Fort Greene. No cameras, no pretentious energy, Just oak wood furniture, good light, and strong espresso. She arrived first, chose a window seat facing the garden wall, wore a cream-knit dress, gold hoops, and her hair in a soft braid. Not because she wanted to look perfect, because she wanted to look like herself. Darian arrived on time. No assistant, no watch, no suit, just a dark green shirt, clean jeans and sneakers. She saw him through the window before he entered. He paused at the door, exhaled, then walked in. "Hi," he said gently. Zahara nodded. "Hey." He didn't sit immediately. He waited for her signal. She tilted her head slightly toward the empty chair. He took it. No hug, no hand touch, no need. The server came. Zahara ordered matcha. He got black coffee. No sugar. They sat in silence for the first few minutes. Let it breathe. No rush. Darian finally spoke. "I didn't think you'd agree. I wasn't sure I would." A nod. Fair. He didn't dive in. Didn't fumble for apologies. He just looked at her with a kind of softness she hadn't seen in him since before the wedding. "You look at peace." "I am." "That's good." A beat. "You look less tired," she said. He chuckled. "Therapy will do that." Her brows lifted slightly. "You're in therapy?" He nodded. "Since after the summit. Twice a week." She sipped her drink, but said nothing. He didn't say it to impress her, and she wasn't here to be impressed. "You've been doing incredible work," he said. "The Wells Collective. It's powerful." Zahara met his gaze. "It's honest. I see that." She leaned back. "So, why did you really want to meet?" He looked down, then back at her. "Because there's a version of me that still owes you clarity." Her expression didn't shift. He continued. "I didn't see what you needed when I had you. I saw what you offered. I consumed it, but I never sat in it." A pause. "I wasn't cheating because of lust. I was hiding from the shame of not measuring up. And Celeste, she didn't ask me to. You didn't let me disappear. That scared me." Zahara blinked slowly. "You used my strength against me." He nodded. "Every time you stayed calm, I told myself it meant you'd never leave. But you did." Her voice was soft now. "I had to. I would have lost myself." The matcha was cold now, but neither touched their cups. Darian looked at her again. "But you didn't lose yourself. You found her." Zahara exhaled. "She was always there. I just made her smaller to protect you." A silence settled between them again. This time, not uncomfortable, reflective. Zahara broke it first. "You're not here to get back together." He shook his head. "No. Good." He nodded again. "But if there's any version of us that can exist in peace, cordial, human, whole, I'd be grateful for that." Zahara tilted her head. "Why?" He gave a small smile. "Because I don't want my son, if I ever have one, to only hear about you through old interviews. I want to be the man who learned from you, not the one who lost you and stayed the same." That landed harder than she expected. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she whispered, "Do you know how hard I fought to keep us whole?" "I do now. And how tired I was, pretending I didn't notice the distance." "I do. And how much I hated that the world called me lucky while I was falling apart in private." Darian's eyes shimmered. "I do, Zahara. And I'm sorry." She nodded, not because the apology fixed it, but because she had waited too long for one that meant something. He reached into his coat pocket and slid a small book across the table. "Black, worn. Is that your journal?" she asked. He nodded. "Read the last page. When you're ready." She didn't pick it up. She didn't need to. "Why show me now?" she asked. He looked her in the eyes. "Because closure isn't something I can ask you for. But I can offer mine." The check came. Darian paid without a word. As they stood to leave, he didn't reach for her hand. He simply said, "Thank you for showing up." She gave a half smile. "I almost didn't. I would have understood." They stepped outside into the late afternoon chill. Cars passed. Leaves blew. Life moved. And so did they. in opposite directions. But this time, without bitterness. Zahara didn't feel heavy after the cafe meeting. She didn't feel light either. She felt centered. There was no weight on her chest, no regret in her heart. Just the calm that comes after telling your story without needing anyone to validate it. She walked home, alone, in heels, and didn't once look back. At the Tribeca penthouse, her team was waiting. Not literally, but emotionally. Her assistant, Bria, caught her near the elevator. "You good?" Zahara gave a slow nod. "Yeah, I'm not angry anymore." Bria raised a brow. Did he try to explain everything? He did. And he didn't defend. He admitted. Bria exhaled. "That's rare." Zahara smiled faintly. "So was I." She didn't broadcast the meeting, didn't tell her audience or slip it into her next talk. Some moments belonged only to the person who survived them. That Saturday night, Zahara lit a candle in her living room, curled up in her robe, and opened the journal Darian had handed her. She turned to the last page. One sentence waited. "I didn't realize I was breaking you because I was too focused on preserving the version of me you already forgave too often." She closed it gently. Didn't cry, didn't smile. Just placed the journal on her bookshelf, between a memoir by Maya Angelou and a book on emotional boundaries. By Monday, she was back in full motion. She led the well-spoken morning call with quiet fire. "Visibility is not vulnerability," she told the team. "We don't build our names to be seen. We build them to survive. And then we use them to reach someone who still thinks they're invisible." The room nodded. Nyla, her operations lead, whispered to another team member, "She's stronger now. I don't even know how, but she is." Back in the city, Darian didn't chase. He didn't send flowers, didn't follow up with a thank you text. Instead, he returned to therapy that Wednesday with something new, a list. Things I know I cost her, a time and softness and quiet joy, uninterrupted safety and spoken trust, her favorite wine nights, her confidence in forever. His therapist asked, "What are you going to do with this?" Darian stared at the page. "I'm going to carry it, so I never take that list from anyone else again." The press tried to stir the pot again. A gossip blog ran a headline, "Are Zahara and Darian Knox back together?" Zahara didn't respond. Her social media team sent a takedown request. Because the point wasn't the speculation. The point was, her silence was finally by choice. A week later, Zahara visited a high school in Harlem. A teacher had reached out about a student-led media club. All girls, mostly black, all brilliant. They had named themselves Speak Louder. She arrived unannounced with lunch, notebooks, and her whole heart. For 2 hours, she listened to 16 and 17-year-olds talk about anxiety, family pressure, and identity in a world that filtered them down to hashtags. One girl asked, "How do you know when your voice is enough?" Zahara smiled softly. "When you stop explaining your pain to people who keep asking you to say it prettier." That line made it into a digital magazine the next day. The world quoted her. But the girls, they felt her. Meanwhile, Darian launched a new mentorship initiative inside Knox Innovations, but he didn't put his name on it. He let his director of culture lead. He showed up every Tuesday, sat in the back, listened to interns talk about burnout, fear, and ambition. He spoke once, near the end of week 4. "I used to think power meant building something bigger than you," he said. "Now I think real power is when you can leave the room, and the room still runs with truth." One intern, a black woman studying media and coding, said quietly, "Sounds like someone taught you that." Darian smiled. She did. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. Zahara, meanwhile, prepared for her first retreat with the Wells Collective. A full weekend upstate. 40 women. No phones. No filters. No followers. Just truth, sweatshirts, and sisterhood. The retreat sold out in 18 minutes. She smiled at that. Not because of the number, because these women weren't coming for perfection. They were coming for presence. On the drive up, Zahara stared out the window as the city faded behind her. The trees blurred. The air cooled. The noise lowered. and she whispered to herself, "I made it," not because she had healed overnight, but because healing, for once, wasn't about returning to what broke her. It was about honoring what survived. Zahara didn't flinch anymore when her name trended. She didn't scramble to read every comment, didn't check who followed or unfollowed, didn't hold her breath for approval from strangers. Her power had become quiet. It wasn't loud headlines or perfect captions. It was in the way people paused when she spoke, the way young women whispered thank you when no one was looking, the way she could walk into a room now, any room, and sit at the head of the table without asking who owned it, because she knew she didn't need to be chosen anymore. She had already chosen herself. The Wells Collective was scaling fast. Partnerships, community grants, licensing deals. Her inbox overflowed. She didn't say yes to everything, only what aligned, only what felt like impact, not attention. At a monthly leadership dinner with her internal team, she opened with a new challenge. "I don't want us to become performative." The room quieted. "We're being watched, admired, copied. Good, but if we start building just to be clapped for, we'll lose the heart of why we started." Nyla nodded. "So, how do we protect the vision?" Zahara smiled, "By remembering who we were before anyone cared." That night, Zahara went home and opened a journal she hadn't touched in weeks. Not Darian's, hers. She flipped to a page from a year ago. She had written, "I feel invisible beside a man the world praises." She stared at that line, then crossed it out with one firm stroke, wrote underneath, "I am no longer beside anyone. I am where I was meant to be, centered." That same week, Darian was scheduled to speak at the Tech X Equity Forum, a prestigious event merging innovation, culture, and accountability. Zahara had spoken there the year before. Now, Darian had been invited to share lessons from leadership loss and reinvention. His panel included 3 other founders, but everyone knew why the room was packed. The moderator didn't ease into it. "You were married to one of the most visible women in media today. Do you regret how you handled that relationship?" Darian didn't dodge. He looked straight at the moderator and said, "Yes." The room went still. He continued, "I regret underestimating her. I regret prioritizing silence over presence. And I regret learning her value after she walked away." The audience held their breath. "But I'm grateful too." Now, they exhaled. Darian folded his hands. "She taught me something most men never get to learn in real time. When a woman builds you, while building herself, and you treat her as background, she will outgrow you with grace." The clip went viral. Zahara's phone buzzed with tags and texts. She didn't respond to any of them. She watched the video once, then closed her phone. No tears, no flashbacks, no fantasies. Just a soft whisper to herself, "He's growing, that's good. But this is no longer about him." The next day, she met with the city commissioner's office. They wanted her input on new policy for equity grants for women-led startups. She read the draft, crossed out 5 paragraphs, and rewrote them on the spot. "This reads like PR. You need to talk about real accountability, real access, not just diversity hires and pretty graphs." The commissioner's advisor blinked. Zahara didn't soften, because women like her had softened for too long. On the train ride home, a young man approached her, mid-20s, nervous, respectful. "Miss Wells, sorry, I don't want a photo. I'm raising a daughter. She's 6. And one day, I want her to walk like you." Zahara smiled, touched. "You just keep showing up for her," she said. "She'll rise because she knows she's already worthy." That night, she lit a candle, sat in her living room, played Nina Simone, and whispered, "I am not waiting to be seen. I am the view." The email arrived on a Thursday. Subject line, "Keynote Invitation, National Women in Power Conference, DC." Zahara almost deleted it, not because she wasn't honored, but because she knew what came with stages like that. Coverage, noise, exposure that had nothing to do with impact. She let it sit in her inbox for 2 days. Didn't mention it to her team. Didn't bring it up at home. Just let it breathe. On Saturday morning, she opened the message again. Would you consider closing the conference this year? We believe your voice is the one everyone needs to hear right now. We're prepared to make this a national broadcast. Zahara stared at the words, the one everyone needs to hear. She didn't want to be the one. She wanted to be part of a shift. Still, she didn't say yes, didn't say no either. She closed her laptop, picked up her keys, and went for a walk. The city was quiet. For once, just her and the wind and the sound of leaves skipping across the sidewalk. She turned into the small bookstore she used to hide in when things got loud. Same creaky floors, same bitter coffee. She walked to the back, where the poetry section lived, picked up a worn copy of Audre Lorde's essays, opened to a random page. Read. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. She smiled. Maybe the speech wasn't about power. Maybe it was about preserving the voices of women who weren't yet seen. That night, she called Layla. I got the invite. I know, Layla said. They called me for a reference. You didn't tell me? I wanted you to decide for you. Zahara paused. What if it's too much? Layla didn't hesitate. Then you'll say no with the same power you use to say yes. Zahara nodded, slowly. Meanwhile, in a quiet apartment in Soho, Darian sat on his couch, phone in hand, staring at an Instagram post. Zahara, in a white pantsuit, standing on the stairs of the Capitol, not smiling, just standing tall. No caption. Thousands of likes. He didn't double tap, didn't text her. He just stared. He'd come to accept something in recent weeks. Zahara wasn't his to cheer for anymore. Not because he wasn't proud, but because he no longer needed to be seen cheering. That was ego, and she deserved peace, not performance. He closed the app, picked up a notebook, wrote, "Love is not about presence. Sometimes it's about stepping far enough back that her light casts no shadow." Back at the penthouse, Zahara clicked reply, typed 3 sentences. I accept the invitation, but I'm not coming to inspire. I'm coming to tell the truth. Let me speak it my way. She hit send and exhaled, not from nerves, from readiness. The next day, she called her team into the conference room. I said yes, she told them. Cheers erupted. Bria gasped. National. Zahara, this is major. I know, Zahara said calmly, but I don't want glam. I want grounding. Say the word, Nyla replied. We'll strip it down to essence. Zahara nodded. Then, let's build a moment. Not a performance. The speech writing began that night. No ghostwriters, just her, a pen, and the truth she'd held back for far too long. She started with this line, I am not powerful because I left. I am powerful because I stayed with myself after walking away. She didn't cry as she wrote. She stood taller. Elsewhere, Darian met with a mentor, an older founder who had lost a great love once too. Regret is a hell of a teacher, the man said. Darian sipped his tea. It is. Do you want her back? No, Darian said, meaning it. I just want her to never feel like I held her back. The mentor nodded slowly. Then keep going, quietly, solidly. That's how you honor her. The day of the keynote arrived. The stage was wide. The cameras were live, and the woman at the center wore no armor, just grace. She walked to the mic, paused, and began. I used to believe I had to be chosen to matter, by love, by the world, by the people in power. A breath, but I was already powerful. I was just tired of asking for permission to be seen. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She didn't sell pain. She offered perspective. And it shifted the room. Darian watched the live stream from his office. Alone, hand on his heart. Not in sadness, in awe. She wasn't his story anymore, but she would always be part of his awakening. And that was a kind of love too. She no longer waits for permission. She no longer asks to be seen. She is the view. Have you ever made yourself small just to fit into someone else's idea of love? Have you ever waited for validation, only to realize your worth wasn't up for debate? Zahara walked away from the noise and built a movement in silence. She didn't clap back. She created legacy. Would you choose your peace, even if no one clapped for it? Would you leave behind comfort to become the version of yourself that finally breathes? Let us know in the comments. Like this video if you believe healing doesn't need to be loud to be real. Share this story with someone who needs to stop waiting and start owning. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind you of your power. Zahara had been sprinting for months, not from pain, not from memory. From responsibility, leadership had replaced heartbreak, but even purpose can wear you thin if you never pause. So when Nyla handed her a plane ticket to Asheville, North Carolina, and said, "Please rest," Zahara didn't argue. She packed a weekend bag, left her phone on airplane mode, and boarded the flight alone. No assistant, no press, no expectations, just time. The retreat was tucked between mountain ranges, 6 cabins, 1 small lake. No Wi-Fi. Exactly what she didn't know she needed. The first night she sat by the fireplace, journal open, and wrote, "This is the first time I've been still without sadness." The days were simple. Morning walks, herbal tea, reading by the creek. She didn't wear makeup, didn't wear heels, didn't think about meetings, mentions, or markets. And for the first time, her body unclenched. Her breath deepened. Her mind softened. On the 3rd day, she met someone. Not romantically, just humanly. A man in his early 40s named Miles. Salt and pepper beard, warm eyes, owned a small bookstore in town. He asked no questions about her work, didn't seem to recognize her. They sat at a community table during lunch and talked about music, documentaries, and who makes the best hot sauce in the South. He didn't flirt. He just listened. She didn't impress. Later that afternoon, they sat on the dock watching dragonflies skim the surface of the lake. Miles glanced at her and said, "You carry peace like someone who had to earn it." Zahara didn't respond right away. Then she said, "I did, and nothing more." He nodded. "That's the kind that lasts." Back in New York, Darian unlocked the door to the Hamptons mansion. The place was still staged the same. Nothing moved. It had sat empty since Zahara walked out. Dust gathered in corners, wine glasses untouched. The couch where Celeste once sat, now covered in silence. He walked through each room slowly, not to revisit, but to release. He found himself in the bedroom. Zahara's side still had the silk pillowcases she loved. He sat on the bed, breathed in, then finally said aloud, "I forgive myself, because hating me won't bring her back, but healing me might help someone else keep their Zahara." He took one last walk through the garden she'd designed. Roses still bloomed, soft, untamed, resilient. He didn't cry. He just whispered, "Thank you for what this was, and what it taught me." Then he locked the door behind him. 2 days later, Zahara flew home. No headlines, no tweets, no makeup, just her. She walked into her apartment, set her bag down, and smiled. Not because she was back, because she hadn't left herself behind this time. 3 days after returning from Asheville, Zahara received a call from a number she didn't recognize. She let it go to voicemail, then listened. "Ms. Wells, this is Simone Alvarez from Blue North Studios. We're producing a limited documentary series titled The Pivot. We believe your story is not just timely, it's transformational. We'd be honored to center one of our episodes on you. Full creative control, no angle, just your truth. Let us know." Zahara sat back in her chair. She didn't move for a while. This wasn't the first time someone had asked. But this time, they weren't chasing headlines. They were offering space. She didn't answer right away. She closed her laptop, stood by her window, and asked herself the question she now lived by. Is this an opportunity or an invitation to be consumed again? That evening, she met with Layla at a quiet rooftop cafe in Soho. Layla ordered chai. Zahara got mint tea. "You gonna do it?" Layla asked. I don't know. Why not? Because once your story becomes content, you can't unshare it. Layla nodded slowly. So, share the part you've made peace with. Zahara looked away. And what about the rest? Let it stay sacred. Meanwhile, Darian stood in a large hall in Brooklyn. The audience, 130 young men, most under 25, all enrolled in a tech mentorship program for underserved communities. He'd been invited to speak not about coding, but about character. He adjusted the mic, didn't clear his throat, just began. There's a woman I used to love, he said. A few heads lifted. I still respect her, but I don't speak to her. Not because she's bitter, but because she grew, and I stayed the same for too long. Silence. I wasn't loud. I wasn't violent. I wasn't cruel in obvious ways. I was quiet in all the moments I should have shown up. He walked across the stage slowly. I had a woman who believed in me more than I believed in myself. I let her do all the emotional lifting, and then I wondered why she collapsed. Several in the audience sat still, eyes wide. Darian kept going. If you are lucky enough to love a woman who leads with both heart and fire, don't wait until she walks away to become someone worth keeping. When he stepped off the stage, 2 young men approached him. One said, "That sounded like my mom." The other said, "I think I've been that guy." Darian didn't smile. He just said, "So don't be." Back at her apartment, Zahara sat with a notebook. She made 2 columns, tell or keep. On the left, she wrote, the first night she knew something shifted. The launch of Well-Spoken, a journey to peace. On the right, she wrote, the depth of her loneliness. The private journal pages. The memory of the last time Darian kissed her forehead without guilt. She stared at the list and felt clear. The next morning, she called Blue North Studios. "I'll do it," she said. "But I'm not giving you pain for drama." Simone replied softly, "We didn't ask for that. We asked for you." Zahara smiled. "Then, we're in alignment." Filming would begin in 6 weeks. Until then, she returned to life as usual. Meetings, planning, mentoring. But something was different now. She no longer feared being known, because she had finally learned how to protect what mattered. Darian received a short message from one of the program leads. That talk changed something. One kid told me he called his girlfriend afterward and just said, "I see you." Darian put down his phone, looked out the window of his apartment, and for the first time in years, he felt full, not because he won anything back, but because he gave something forward. Zahara watched an early test reel of the documentary teaser. No narration, just visuals. Her walking along the lake in Asheville, typing by the window, laughing with her team, reading to teenage girls in a school library. The last frame faded to black, then showed her, quote, "I didn't return to the life I left. I built the life I deserved." She watched it twice, then whispered, "Yes." The studio sent her a private link. Final cut, no notes, no edits needed. She sat in her office, blinds half drawn, morning light washing over the table. Headphones on, heart steady. She pressed play. The documentary didn't start with her name. It started with her absence. Empty chair, muted mic, a slow shot of a closed journal. Then her voice filled the space. "I didn't plan to tell this story, but I realized someone might need to hear it before they forget how to hold themselves upright." Zahara's hand froze over her mouse. She watched herself, watching herself. The girl who once smiled through betrayals. The woman who now said no without guilt. The leader who never asked to be followed. Her voice wasn't shaking. It was rooted. By the time the 38-minute feature ended, she didn't cry. She stood, walked to the mirror, looked at her reflection and whispered, "That girl deserved to be protected. That woman deserves to be seen." 3 days later, the documentary trailer dropped. It didn't mention Darian. Didn't need to. It wasn't about the break. It was about the becoming. The internet exploded. Within 24 hours, it had over 1 million views. She received hundreds of messages, most from women, some from men. but one stood out. "I showed this to my mother. She said she finally understands why I left. Thank you for speaking what some of us never got to say." Zahara replied personally, "You didn't need to justify your piece, but I'm honored to have helped you name it." At the same time, across the city, Darian Knox finalized paperwork with his foundation's board. They were launching a new mentorship initiative for women in tech leadership. The name? The Zahara Wells Fellowship. He didn't ask for her approval, didn't alert the press, just signed the papers, quietly, respectfully. The foundation director raised an eyebrow. "You sure she's okay with this?" "She doesn't need to be involved," Darian said. "She's the reason." That's enough. His assistant paused at his door later that day. "You've been different." He looked up. "Focused." "No," she smiled. "Free." He didn't reply, just looked back at the framed quote on his wall. Her quote, "When silence starts costing your soul, it's time to speak or leave." Zahara spent the next week preparing for the documentary's private premiere screening. She kept the guest list short. No press, no influencers. Just her team, a few close mentors, and young women from the first cohort of the Wells Collective. She didn't wear a gown. She wore a dark brown pantsuit, flats, and a clear face. No filter. Just freedom. Before the screening, someone asked her if she was nervous. "No," she said, "because I'm no longer performing. I'm simply telling the truth." Midway through the film, she looked out at the audience. One of the girls, barely 16, had tears in her eyes. And Zahara knew. This wasn't about legacy. This was about mirrors, showing others the reflection of what survival could look like. Later that night, as everyone filed out, she stood alone near the exit. Someone tapped her shoulder. It was a young father. He held his daughter's hand. "She wants to be like you," he said. Zahara knelt to meet the little girl's eyes. "You don't need to be like me," she whispered. "You just need to be loud enough to never go unnoticed." The girl smiled. Zahara stood again. She didn't text Darian. She didn't need to. She knew, somehow, that he already saw it, and that this time he wouldn't interrupt her moment. He didn't. He simply watched the trailer alone in his apartment, placed his phone face down, and whispered to no one. "I see you, fully." Finally, the email came in the middle of a Tuesday. Subject line, "Congratulations, Zahara. Your fellowship is changing lives already." She blinked. Fellowship? She hadn't launched one. Not yet. She opened the message. It was from a 24-year-old black woman in Detroit, studying UX design, living with her grandmother, third in line for the Zahara Wells Fellowship. She had written, "I don't know if you ever thought someone like me would say your name in our house, but I do. Every day. I said it when I opened the laptop, when I submitted my application. When I got the email saying I was selected." Zahara sat back slowly, confused, honored, still confused. She forwarded the message to Bria with a single line, "What is this?" An hour later, Bria was in her office. "Darian started it," she said gently. "Through his foundation." Zahara blinked. "He never told me. No press, no post. It's been quiet. I only found out through a mutual contact last month." Zahara turned to the window, not angry, not emotional, just processing. He hadn't reached out. He hadn't asked for permission. But he had used her name, not to win her back, but to lift someone else. And something about that, how quiet it all was, hurt in a new way. Not because it crossed a line, but because it proved a truth she had always feared. He could have honored her all along. He just didn't do it when it counted. That night, Zahara opened her laptop, searched the Zahara Wells Fellowship, minimal information, no quote from Darian, no picture of her. Just a paragraph that read, "A leadership grant awarded to women of color entering tech fields who demonstrate clarity, compassion, and quiet resilience." Zahara sat still. Read it again. Quiet resilience. That's what he saw in her now. Not fire, not fight, Not thunder. Quiet. She closed the tab, stared at the screen. She didn't know whether to call him, to thank him, to ask why now, to correct the version of her he was finally showing up for. Instead, she picked up her pen and wrote in her journal, "He sees me now, but I needed to be seen then, so I will not return, but I will not resent." 3 days later, she attended a private event for women in tech. One of the panelists mentioned the fellowship, called it a game changer, said it was inspiring to see men create space without centering themselves. Zahara didn't speak, just smiled, and let them clap. Later that week, Darian received a short handwritten note. No return address. No signature. Just this: "Thank you for doing something without needing a response. I hope you carry that discipline into every space from now on." He folded the note, pressed it to his chest, and whispered, "I will." Zahara didn't need recognition, not anymore. But when the next fellowship recipient posted a video holding her acceptance letter, crying, saying, "I didn't even think people like me got chances like this," Zahara smiled and whispered, "Let it multiply." She didn't call Darian. She didn't owe him that. But in her heart, she offered him what few ever get, a peaceful ending. The email came 2 weeks later, from an unfamiliar name, a polished, formal tone. Subject: "You've been selected, Innovators of Impact 2025. Honoree Zahara skimmed the text once, then again slower. She was being honored by the National Coalition for Women in Technology. Keynote attendance was optional, but the award, named after a trailblazer she'd studied in undergrad, was not. Bria practically screamed when Zahara told her, "I've already RSVP'd on your behalf." Bria grinned and picked the dress. Zahara laughed. "Let me guess. Something bold? Red, silk, backless. Of course." When the night came, Zahara didn't wear the red. She chose white, clean lines, soft satin, a square neckline and sleeves that brushed her wrists. No jewelry, except a pair of diamond studs her mother once gave her. She arrived alone, no driver, no fanfare, just her. The ballroom was full of tech founders, investors, creatives, and press. There was buzz about AI, ethics, inclusion, patents, and a new startup going public that week. Zahara made her way toward the back, until an usher gently redirected her to a table near the front, her name elegantly printed on a gold place card. Next to her, Marissa Wynn, Zahara's old department head from Doyen Industries, the woman who once looked her straight in the eye and said, "You're talented, but not quite leadership material. You're not dynamic enough." Zahara sat calmly. Marissa's eyes widened when she saw her. "Oh, Zahara." Her voice tilted up, like she wasn't sure what tone to use. Zahara nodded once. "Ms. Wynn." Marissa adjusted her posture. "It's been years." "You look well." "I am well," Zahara replied. "I hear great things. This fellowship of yours especially." Zahara smiled, steady. "It's making waves." Marissa blinked. "I'm glad. I always knew you'd make something of yourself." Zahara held her gaze. "No," she said softly, "you didn't. But that's okay. I did." There was no venom in her voice, no heat, just truth. Marissa looked down at her napkin. The silence stretched, but Zahara didn't fill it. She had spent enough years patching other people's discomfort. Let her sit in it now. The lights dimmed. A host walked on stage, and the ceremony began. Speeches flowed, awards were announced, photos snapped. Then, our next honoree redefines quiet impact. A designer, founder, and thought leader whose work speaks for women in spaces that were never built to include them. Please welcome Zahara Wells. Applause. Standing ovation. Zahara rose. Her white dress shimmered under the spotlight. She walked calmly to the stage, heels clicking like punctuation. At the podium, she didn't adjust the mic. She simply began. "I didn't come here tonight with a speech. I came with memory. The room quieted. I remember what it felt like to have my ideas dismissed before I finished a sentence. I remember what it felt like to say, "I think we can do better," and hear, "Maybe you're being too sensitive." I remember being told that power had to be loud, that success had to be sharp, that leadership had to cut, to be felt. She paused. I believed them, for a while. But then I realized, power doesn't have to shout, it doesn't have to dominate. Sometimes, power just walks into a room knowing it doesn't have to prove a single thing. She scanned the crowd, and briefly, purposely, her eyes landed on Marissa. I stand here not because I was allowed to, but because I stopped asking. Applause rose again, this time fuller, deeper. When Zahara stepped down, 3 women stopped her near the edge of the stage. One whispered, "You said what I never could." Another said, "I'm naming my mentorship circle after you." The last, a woman no older than 21, simply hugged her with tears in her eyes. Zahara thanked them all, moved with grace through the rest of the evening, and left before dessert. Outside, the night was cool, quiet. Bria had texted earlier, but Zahara hadn't replied yet. She wasn't in a rush to go home, so she walked, block after block. She passed buildings where she'd once waited for interviews, coffee shops where she'd written proposals on napkins, a corner where she once cried after being told, "You're not quite what we're looking for." Now, she was exactly who she had looked for all along. She pulled out her phone, not to check texts, but to record a voice memo, her voice steady, her pace slow. To the girl who cried outside this building, "You don't belong to the pain they gave you. You belong to the peace you earned." She saved the message, kept walking. Not once did she look back. She didn't need to. Her life no longer lived behind her. It was unfolding, step by step, under her own name. The next morning, Zahara woke before the sun. She brewed tea instead of coffee, sat by the window with her journal open and nothing on the page yet. There was no urgency, no looming deadline, no meeting to prepare for, but her mind was full, not cluttered, clear. She picked up her pen and wrote a single line, "Let it be soft now." That afternoon, Bria called. "Did you see the posts?" Zahara blinked. "What posts?" "Girl, your speech from last night is everywhere. Someone recorded the whole thing. It's on LinkedIn, Twitter, even TikTok. And the quote about power not having to shout, already being used as a caption by people I know who don't even like tech." Zahara chuckled. "That's wild." "It's not wild. It's overdue." Later that day, she received an invitation, a global summit for women in emerging markets. Panel topic, Reimagining Power Structures. She was listed as the opening speaker. No audition, no vetting process. Just, "We've followed your work. We want your voice in the room." She forwarded the invite to Bria with a note, "This one feels right." Zahara didn't tell many people. She didn't post. She didn't celebrate out loud. But in her private joy, she was expanding. She walked differently. She ate slower. She looked in the mirror without critique. She replied to messages with warmth instead of guilt. She didn't ask for permission to rest. She just did. A week later, an old colleague messaged her. Someone from Doyen, not Marissa, but someone who once ignored every idea she pitched, someone who voted against her promotion. The message read, "Hey Zahara, just wanted to say congrats. You've always had that quiet strength. I see that now." She didn't reply, not because she was bitter, but because she wasn't interested in revisionist history. If they hadn't seen her then, they didn't deserve proximity now. That evening, she pulled out her old laptop from storage, the one she used in the Doyen days, covered in old stickers. She turned it on, expecting it not to work. It powered up instantly. She laughed. On the desktop was a folder labeled "Someday." She opened it. Inside were files she had forgotten, design drafts, product pitches, notes titled, "If I Ever Start My Own Firm." She clicked on one and read a line that made her eyes sting. "Power is not dominance. Power is direction. And I want to design with direction. That version of her, tired, dismissed, quietly defiant, had written that. She whispered to the screen, "You were always enough." Then she copied the whole folder to her new system. A bridge from who she was to who she had become. That weekend, she gave a private workshop for black girls in high school interested in design. Bria organized it, kept it off social media. Just a small room, 10 students, and Zahara at the center in jeans and sneakers. No stage, no slides, just stories. She told them how she once got told her tone was too flat to be compelling. How she almost gave up after being passed over for a promotion she trained her manager to do. How she once had to take a loan from her best friend to keep her lights on after quitting her job. The girls listened wide-eyed. One asked, "How did you know it would all work out?" Zahara smiled. "I didn't, but I knew I wouldn't let it break me." Another girl raised her hand, shy. "How do you deal with people who try to make you smaller?" Zahara knelt beside her chair. "I stopped making space for them in my story." The girl blinked fast, nodded, wrote something in her notebook. After the session, they took a group photo. No flashy backdrop, no logos, just joy. Bria sent it to her later with the caption, "You did that." Zahara replied, "We did." That night, Zahara journaled again. Only this time, she didn't write about what hurt. She wrote about what healed. She wrote, "Healing didn't come from justice, it came from joy, from creating more than I was given, from offering grace without surrender, from remembering that silence is not absence, it's clarity." Then she closed the journal and let herself sleep with no armor, because there was nothing left to defend. She wasn't proving anything anymore. She was simply living. And the life she built? No longer a response to the pain, but a celebration of her presence. The ballroom at the International Women in Tech Summit buzzed with quiet awe as Zahara walked onto the stage. She wore a deep sapphire pantsuit, sharp lines, clean structure, no frills, nothing performative, just presence. The applause came fast, full, long. Zahara adjusted the mic, let it fade. Then, calmly, clearly, she began. "I used to think power had a sound, a volume, a roar." She paused, letting the silence fill with attention. "But sometimes, power is what you refuse to explain, what you survive without needing to retell." The room quieted even more. "I'm not here today because I did something extraordinary. I'm here because I did something ordinary, consistently. I chose myself, every time. Even when it cost me, no notes, no script. Her truth was the only outline she needed." There's a cost to visibility, especially as a black woman in spaces built on invisibility. Some people nodded, others stared, stilled by the weight of being seen. "But I didn't come here to be clapped for. I came to say this: there will be rooms that treat you like you don't belong, and you'll want to prove that you do." She let that land. "You don't have to." She scanned the crowd. Her eyes stopped near the second row. Camille, her former college advisor, the same woman who once told Zahara not to overshare her background on fellowship applications because it might make funders uncomfortable. Zahara didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She smiled, then continued. "I used to chase proof. Now I build futures that don't need it." The applause that followed was thunderous. But Zahara didn't bask. She didn't linger. She gave a final nod, stepped back from the mic, and exited the stage as calmly as she had entered. Backstage, Bria waited with open arms. "You floated," Bria whispered, hugging her. "I grounded," Zahara replied. That night, the summit hosted a formal gala. Zahara almost skipped it, but Bria convinced her to show up for herself, not as a speaker, but as a woman who had lived to see the fruit of her quiet revolutions. The ballroom had shifted from panels and name tags to string lights and soft jazz. Tables were dressed in white linen, each place card printed with clean serif fonts and gold foil detail. Zahara walked past handshakes and stares, smiling politely, collecting compliments like raindrops, brief, expected, and not meant to last. Halfway through the evening, She excused herself to the balcony. The cool air kissed her skin. She closed her eyes. And then, Zahara. She turned. It was Camille, older now, softer around the eyes. I just wanted to say, I was wrong. Zahara raised her brows. Camille continued, back then, about your background, about how much space it deserved. I was trying to protect your chances, but I see now I was limiting your truth. Zahara said nothing. I watched your keynote, and I realized I didn't teach you much, did I? Zahara didn't laugh, but she let her guard down a bit. You taught me what I didn't want to become, she replied gently. Camille nodded. That's fair. There was no lingering tension, just clarity. I'm proud of you, Camille said, offering nothing more than her sincerity. Zahara nodded. I'm proud of me too. Later, as the night thinned out and the lights dimmed, Zahara and Bria sat in the back seat of a black SUV headed to the hotel. Bria broke the silence. You didn't even break a sweat up there. I used to sweat because I thought people were trying to see through me, Zahara said. Now I know they're just trying to see themselves. Bria smiled. That's deep. No, that's peace. And with that, Zahara leaned back, took off her heels, and closed her eyes, not to escape, but to rest. For the first time in years, she had nothing to prove, only space to expand. Zahara stepped out of the black town car and onto the familiar curb of her neighborhood. No red carpet, no cameras, no speeches, just her neighbors' fall decorations swaying on their porches, and the sound of children playing hopscotch down the street. She let her heels click softly along the pavement until she reached her townhouse door. Unlock. Step inside. Peace. Her peace. She dropped her bag, slid off her blazer, and opened the curtains wide. Outside, the trees blushed gold and rust. Her phone buzzed. It wasn't an email or a network notification. It was Darian. Zahara stared at the screen for 3 long seconds before answering. Hello, I'm outside. Her eyes narrowed. Outside where? Your door. She moved slowly to her window. Sure enough, he was there, leaning against his car. Not in a suit, no bouquet, just jeans, a hoodie, and eyes that didn't carry expectation. I don't want to bother you, he said, once she stepped outside. I wanted to return something. Zahara crossed her arms. What could you possibly have of mine? Darian reached into his jacket pocket. She tensed. He pulled out a photo, creased, faded, one she hadn't seen in years. It was them. At her graduation, she was in her cap and gown, beaming. He stood beside her, young and proud. Back when love didn't come with conditions, I kept it, he said quietly. Even when we stopped making sense, Zahara didn't speak. Her throat tightened. I came because I never said the words right, not when it mattered. She stepped down one stair, close enough to hear everything, far enough to not fall back into anything. I blamed your ambition, he said, made it the villain, told myself it was cold, distant, but truth is, it scared me. His voice cracked. You weren't too much, Zahara. I was too small. She blinked, lips pressed tight. I didn't come to ask for another chance, Darian added quickly. You look different, lighter. You don't belong to the pain anymore. And I shouldn't still be holding parts of you that I broke. Silence, not angry silence, not regretful, peaceful. She took the photo from his hand and folded it. I loved you, she said softly. And for a long time, that love shaped how I saw myself. He nodded. I'm not angry anymore, she added. I'm just not that girl in the photo. Darian's shoulders dropped. He exhaled deeply, almost in relief. That's all I needed to hear, he said. Thank you for forgiving me, even if I never deserved it. Zahara gave a small nod. He turned to leave, then paused, looked back once. You'll change the world, Zahara, he said. You already did mine. And then he left. No begging, no rewrites, just closure. Later that night, Zahara curled up on her couch with a blanket and warm tea. Her phone buzzed again. This time, It was a text from Kennedy. You absolutely crushed that summit. The internet is in love with you. Drinks Friday? Zahara smiled. Another buzz. From the hospital. Dr. Hayes here. Just wanted to say the foundation grant will change everything for our women's wing. We're naming the new room after your mom. Her smile softened. And finally, one last message. From Harmony. A selfie of her and Zahara's goddaughter in matching overalls. She saw you on TV and clapped. Zaza smart. She said, you better come visit soon. Zahara held the phone close to her chest. Not because of the texts, but because every word, every message, was a thread, and she wasn't unraveling anymore. She was woven whole. She didn't need headlines to prove her worth, didn't need applause to feel seen. She'd rebuilt her life, and she did it with grace. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video to show your support. Comment with your favorite scene or line. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories so you never miss another tale that reminds you how love, growth, and grace still exist. Your voice matters here. We tell stories that reflect real hearts, real choices, and real consequences. So join us. There's more coming, and you'll want to be here for every twist, every lesson, and every last word.